I think we discovered a game changer for those looking to have a concave front foot pad on their Onewheel. At the end of the video, you will see that we are very, very close, if not there. The game changer is that the sensor for the Onewheel Plus can be cut and still work. We haven't tried to use an XR sensor, which looks a little different in the vids I've seen, as it is darker in color than the sensor that our Plus has. So we're not sure with that yet, but we're definitely sure with the Plus. Looking at the sensor in detail, we determined that it could probably only be cut from the bottom from the way it's shaped. And so that's what we did. We cut it on the bottom. But you'll also notice though, in order to get this to work right, you'll have to cut up along the little connector that goes down the middle and underneath the foot pad. It needs to be cut back so that the shorter sensor can actually work with the foot pad. The reason why the sensor needs to be cut is because, as mentioned in other videos, the concavity of the foot pad causes the sensor to bend multiple directions, and that makes it so I guess the sensor isn't working correctly. So in order to get around that, we try to make the sensor smaller to the point where it's as flat as possible without going so small that your foot can't fit on it. The foot pad that we used is the OG Cush pad. We also have the Cush High foot pad, which we didn't even attempt to use because the concavity of it is just so much more than the OG Cush that we decided to go with this one, and it's working out pretty well so far. With that said, we have spent several days trying to get this to work, and because of that, we knew we were going to move the foot pad sensor around a lot. And we never did use any type of 3M, B70, or any type of glue other than what was leftover residue from removing the grip tape from the foot pad. With trial and error trying to move the foot pad from higher up on the rear kind of forward to make it more lower where it's more flat, we saw that we had to cut actually a little bit more off the sensor. So one thing of note, when cutting the sensor, if you cut on the dashed line, what looks like a dashed line on the sensor, and you cut it straight as possible, it doesn't have to be perfect, I use scissors, it will allow the sensor to still work. So use those what look like dashed lines as your guide, but don't cut anywhere other than, well, I'll call the bottom of the sensor, which is the part of the sensor closest to the tire. Don't cut any other part of the sensor. At least I haven't tried any other part, and being able to cut any part at all was good enough for me. So I was going to leave it at that. Now near the bottom of the foot pad or the sensor where it's closest to the tire, you'll notice that there's ridges in the Cush, OG Cush foot pad, and so you don't want anything to hang over there. So you got to be careful with that. I did cut out the blue dot that was at the top, we'll call the top, which is the closest to the rear. And there was a little circle, and it was cut out, and it didn't affect anything at all with the working of the sensor. I think the dot was there just maybe for showing whether or not there was water in there, like you see in sometimes in iPhones or whatever, and smartphones where they have a little paper dot that maybe turns red or something when it's exposed to the water. But as you can see, I'm showing up where I cut that out as a relief, cut that dot out. A couple things to add: the sensor from the Plus seems like it's a little bit different than what I saw in the videos for the V1, because I've never had a V1 or worked with the V1 sensor, in that there are two layers to the sensor. There's the one that goes like a S shapes, and then there's a bottom part that has what looks like just lines going down, and that's where you get your weave look. So there's not kind of like a sensor with a plastic cover per se, like I think the V1 seemed to look like. What this is two layers of sensor. So when cutting out or taking out the sensor, you'll want to take the whole sensor out and not take the layers of the sensor. I never took the layers of the sensors, the two plastic sheets apart underneath the grip tape. I took it out as one whole sensor. The two pieces always stayed together. To this day, they've always stayed together. And just used heat and a blow dryer, from a blow dryer, to be able to peel it off after I removed the grip tape, of course. Now we're going to get into riding it after the very first attempt to transplant the sensor without cutting it or anything. Just remove it from the Plus footpad, original footpad, and putting it onto the OG Cush footpad. And as you'll see, it was not working really well. We're just trying to ride around on it and get it so that it's all kind of pushed down and used to being stood on. And it just, you can see it's not stopping. It's just not working at all. And we had various results by doing different little things, trying to get it. And one point, I think we got it working okay, because maybe I taped it down with some painter's tape or something. But as you can see, it's far from working at this point when we just tried to do a straight transplant. Now we'll jump to when the sensor has been cut at this point, and we're test riding it in the backyard, and we just want to kind of ride it a little bit, make sure the grip tape's down good, the weight from standing on it has maybe leveled things out or maybe changed anything, just kind of get it. Then going over that rut's really important, because and there's a successful stop right there. One of the iterations of testing this out, it was working okay before we cut it, actually. And we went over that rut, and that just, I guess, made something shift with the weight of a person on there. Okay, so now that was a good stop, because you fall off, it's not supposed to roll, it's supposed to just turn off, and it did successfully. So, and it did there too. The hill is it's a little bit of a hill, and it's wet grass, no tread on the tire, and so it turned off as it should have. So we've had nothing but successes so far. The rut, yeah, it made it so that it triggered something one time when we were early on trying to transfer the sensor. So going over that rut was important. to knowing that this is stable, this fix. So jumped off. Now this is one of the few, one or two maybe, failures. I would consider that a failure because it ghosted and we had to turn it off. But turned it right back on, and it was ready to go, as you see by the front headlight. So that's one failure in what, 3 or 4 successes. That's another successful stop. Let's see what else happens. Another successful stop. And that was successful. You fall off, it doesn't ghost. That's a success. So far, that was fine. Jump off, wheel stop by itself, another success. So we own a Plus and an XR, and so that looked like it was gonna ghost, but it stopped. And the XR has the cush high on the rear, and we were just using our Plus as a mule to see if we can get the OG cush on the front working with the sensor. And eventually we were thinking maybe of putting, for symmetry, putting the OG cush on the XR board where the cush high is. But you'll notice that we swapped out the rear footpad grip tape on our Plus. It was black and now it's blue. That's nothing to do with the front pad, but I thought I'd point that out. And that, I think it's a success. Yeah, the wheel's not rolling. One thing we did do on this footpad is use 6 bolts to hold it down. Just like we did on the cush high on our XR, where you take out a couple of the rail bolts that are in the back, or in this case, with the front footpad, it would be the ones in the front of the board that are not underneath, but there's holes there that will go right into the rail guard. And so we did use that, and I think that helped in stability of the rubber not moving around as much as well. That's it for now, and we'll keep you updated. We'll keep trying it out, probably in the backyard and on trails, and let everyone know who's interested whether or not this worked out in the long term.